I'm reading about requirements of the identity theft and red flag requirements. So parts I and J of the regulation. The users must implement reasonable procedures to allow them, at the time they receive a notice of address discrepancy, to form a reasonable belief that the consumer report relates to the consumer about whom it has requested the report. Users can comply with this by verifying the CIP information given to them by the consumer, verifying the information with third parties, or asking the consumer to verify it. When it receives a notice of address discrepancy from the consumer reporting agency, a user must have reasonable policies and procedures to ensure that it furnishes the consumer address to the consumer reporting agency that the user has confirmed is accurate when the user A can form a reasonable belief that the consumer report relates to the consumer about whom the user requested the report, and B establishes a continuing relationship with the consumer, and C regularly furnishes information to the consumer reporting agency from which the address discrepancy notice was obtained. Compliance may be achieved by verifying the address with the consumer, verifying the address with its own records, and verifying the address with a third party, or using other reasonable means. The accurate address must be furnished as part of the information the user regularly reports to the consumer reporting agency for the reporting period in which it establishes a relationship with the consumer. Red flag requirements. Detection and prevention of identity theft. Coverage. Covered accounts include accounts that involve continuing relationships established for personal, family, or household purposes that involve or are designed to permit multiple payments or transactions, including credit cards, mortgages, checking accounts, savings accounts, utility accounts, and phone accounts. Any other account the institution offers for which there is a reasonable risk to the consumer of identity theft. The risk assessment portion of the red flag requirement. Institutions must initially and periodically perform risk assessments to determine whether they offer or maintain covered accounts, taking into consideration the methods they use to open accounts, methods they provide to access accounts, and their previous experience with identity theft. A program. Establishment of an identity theft program. Each institution with covered accounts must develop and implement an identity theft prevention program designed to detect, prevent, and mitigate identity theft in connection with any existing covered account or the opening of a covered account. The program must be appropriate to the size and complexity of the institution and the nature and scope of its activities. Part 4. Elements of an identity theft program. Identity theft programs must include the following elements. A. Identity theft red flags for the covered accounts and incorporate them into the identity theft program. B. Detect red flags that have been incorporated into the financial institutions program. And C. Respond appropriately to any red flags to prevent and mitigate identity theft. Ensure the program is updated periodically to reflect changes in risks to customers and its own safety and soundness. Administration of the identity theft program. Financial institutions must A. Obtain approval of the identity theft program from board or directors or a committee of the board. B. Involve the board, a member of a board committee or senior management in the program's oversight, development, and implementation. C. Regularly train the institution's staff to effectively implement the program. And D. Exercise appropriate oversight of service provider relationships. Specific red flags. Each institution should consider red flags from a number of resources listed in Appendix J of the regulation when designating the implementation, designing, and implementing its identity theft program. Next section under really getting into this outline. The next section under identity theft and red flag requirements involves the duty of card issuers. Address validation requirements. Issuers of debit and credit cards must implement reasonable policies and procedures to assess the validity of address changes. Validity of changes of address if they receive a change of address for a consumer's debit or credit card and within a short period of time during at least the first 30 days after receiving the notice, the issuer receives a request for a replacement or additional card. The issuer may satisfy the timing requirements if it verifies the address change before it receives a request for a replacement or additional card. The issuer may satisfy the address verification requirements if it notifies the cardholder at the cardholder's address or by any means previously agreed to by the cardholder, and provides the cardholder a means of promptly reporting incorrect address changes or otherwise assesses the validity of the change of address in accordance with its identity theft prevention policy. And B, communication with the cardholder. Any communication required must be sent to the cardholder separately from the issuer's regular correspondence with the cardholder.
Yeah, no wonder they charge you $3 for using that machine.
Yeah.
I see why now.
Risk-based pricing notice. When a notice is required. Yeah, because I have to read this stuff. You pay for me to read this stuff. The following persons must provide a notice if the form required by this regulation. The persons providing the risk-based pricing notice are anyone who uses the credit report in connection with the application for consumer purpose credit, and who grants credit on terms that are materially less favorable than the most favorable terms offered by consumers by that person. To consumers by that person. Credit. Business credit is excluded. Notices must be provided to a consumer when the terms on the credit product offered to the consumer are materially less favorable when directly compared than terms offered on the same product to other consumers. Examples of specific credit products include such things as student loans, unsecured credit, secured credit, new automobile loans, and used automobile loans. The material terms include 1. For open-end plans, the APR required to be disclosed under Reg V, but not a temporary discount to the APR that is lower than the APR that will apply after the temporary rate expires, a penalty APR, or a fixed rate option APR. These are material terms. These material terms are under D in the risk-based pricing notice. Second material term explained here is for credit cards, the APR for purchases, or if there is no APR for purchases, the APR that varies based on credit information that has the most significant financial impact on the consumer. And third, for closed-end plans, the APR disclosed under Reg Z. And fourth, for credit with no APR, the financial term that varies between the credit information and that has most significant financial impact on the customer, such as a required deposit or membership fee. Material less favorable means that with respect to the same lender, the material terms granted to one consumer differ from the material terms granted to another consumer, such that the cost of the credit the first consumer would be significantly greater than the cost of credit to the other consumer. Factors that are relevant in determining the significance of the cost differences are the type of credit, the credit term, and the extent of the difference in material terms. Credit score proxy alternative to making direct comparisons of the terms of credit. Methods. The lender may meet its obligations by determining a cutoff score, the score representing the point of which 40% of the lender's borrowers have higher scores and 60% have lower scores, and providing a risk-based pricing notice to all consumer borrowers whose scores fall below the cutoff. In a case where the lender has granted credit on its most favorable terms to more than 40% of its borrowers, the lender can set its own cutoff score at the point at which the approximate percentage of customers would have received credit on other than the most favorable terms and therefore would receive a risk-based pricing notice. Determining the cutoff score, sampling approach. A person who already uses risk-based pricing must calculate the cutoff score by considering the credit scores of all or a representative sample of credit scores of the consumers that has provided credit for specific types of credit products. Secondary source approach, which is the person who is a new entrant to the credit process, offering a new credit product or new to risk-based pricing, may initially determine the cutoff score based on information from market research or information derived from relevant third-party resources. Third, acquiring credit portfolios. When acquiring a credit portfolio as a result of a merger or acquisition, may determine the cutoff score from the party with whom it merged or from which it acquired the portfolio. 4. Recalculating cutoff scores. A person using the credit score proxy method must recalculate the cutoff method no less often than every 2 years. A person using the secondary source method based on market research or using a method of another party due to a merger or acquisition must base the cutoff score on its own personal customer data within 1 year. If the lender does not make a loan or its own customers within that year, the lender may wait until it has enough data on its own customers to calculate the cutoff score. In any event, the lender must use credit scores of its own customers to calculate its cutoff score within 2 years of making loans to its own customers. Using 2 or more scores. If the lender uses 2 or more scores to determine the material terms of credit, it must use the same method when calculating the cutoff score and credit score not available. If the consumer's credit score is not available, the lender must assume that the consumer obtains credit on terms that are materially less favorable and provide a risk-based pricing notice to the consumer. Third is the tiered pricing method under the risk-based pricing notice, which I would never use as I read the method, the 40%, 60% method, but for each lender that set the material terms of credit by placing consumers within discrete pricing tiers based on the consumer's credit report must provide a risk-based pricing notice to all consumers who are not in the top 2 tiers or tiers. If a lender has 4 or fewer pricing tiers, consumers in all tiers except the top tier, lowest price, must be provided with risk-based pricing notices. B. If a lender has 5 or more pricing tiers, it can comply with the notice requirement by providing risk-based pricing notices to all consumers who are not in the top 2 tiers. The lender may add any other tiers to the top 2 tiers that, together with the top 2 tiers, comprise no less than the top 30%, but no more than the top 40% of the total number of tiers. Customers in the remaining bottom tiers must receive a risk-based pricing. I know, he doesn't like it. Alternative method for credit card users. Credit card issuers may use the credit score proxy or tiered pricing method, or may provide a risk-based pricing notice to a consumer when the consumer is responding to a direct mail application or solicitation in which there is more than one purchase. APR, and the issuer provides the consumer with an APR that is greater than the lowest rate that has been provided on that credit card product based on a consumer report. The consumer card issuer is not required to provide a risk-based pricing notice if the issuer's program offers only one rate, not including a temporary discounted rate or a penalty rate, or if the issuer offers the consumer the lowest APR available on the program, even if there is a lower APR offered by the issuer or another card program. Account review. A risk-based pricing notice must be provided to the customer when a lender uses the consumer report and the review of an existing account, and as a result, increasing the APR on the account. General contact requirements for notice. Risk-based pricing notices must include, and this is A through I, and then I has another 6 parts. A, a statement of the customer's report includes information about the customer's credit history. B, a statement that the terms of the credit offered are based on information in the consumer report. C, a statement that the terms offered may be less favorable than those offered to consumers with better credit histories. D, a statement that the customer has the right to verify the accuracy of the consumer report into disputing inaccurate information. E, the identity of each consumer reporting agency that furnished a report used in the credit decision. F, a statement that federal law gives the consumer the right to request a copy of the consumer report without charge for 60 days after receiving the notice. G, a statement that instructs the customer how to obtain a consumer report from the consumer reporting agencies defined in this notice, including its toll-free number where applicable. A statement directing consumers to the FTC, the Fed website, or obtain more information about consumer reports is H. I is if a credit score of the consumer is used in setting the material terms of credit, then the following must be included. This is 1 through 6. 1, a statement of the credit score is a number that takes into account. Oh, we got a break.